Temptation is all around us. It is with us every day. We see an advertisement for a new car and we want it, or at least we wouldn't mind having it. We may even go so far as finding out the price and angling to find a way to pay for it. We go shopping and fall madly in love with a Coach bag, or justify the expensive sneakers because, after all, we do go to the gym and everyone else has them. Our friends have the latest iPod or tablet or phone, and we deserve to have it too, because we don't want to be left out or thought of as different. We work just as hard as they do, and we deserve to have the things that make us happy. Acquiring material things does make us happy, at least until the bill comes in, and then we feel the pain. Then there are the times when we are tempted to spend too much money for unselfish reasons. We want to give our children or grandchildren something that they really want, even though it isn't Christmas or their birthday. Are we trying to buy their love? How do we avoid these materialistic temptations? Is material happiness what God had in mind for us? How do we keep them from distracting us from God's plan? What is God's plan for us? This morning we heard about two very different reactions to temptation and two different ideas about what God had planned for them. In Genesis, we met the serpent tempting Eve and Adam to eat the fruit of the forbidden tree. Now they know that God has already told them that they may not eat the fruit of this tree, and that even if they only touch it, they will die. The serpent, or devil, who was always, even back then, looking for new recruits, told Eve and Adam that they wouldn't die, but that when they ate the fruit of this tree, that their eyes would be opened, and that they would be like God, and know good and evil. Adam and Eve, until this time, were living in paradise. They were exactly like us when we were children. They were safe and warm and well-fed. They didn't know that they were in paradise, just as we didn't know how good or bad our lives were, because we had nothing to compare it to, and neither did they. And so Adam and Eve had no idea what the knowledge of evil would be like, or that they were about to lose the relationship that they had with God if they tried to find out. As for having some of God's knowledge, well, that didn't sound so bad, so why not taste the fruit? When I was a child, a very small child, I didn't know evil either. I had parents who loved me and protected me. I had a big brother who, even on Saturday mornings, even though he included me when he went to the field to play baseball with his friends, I wasn't allowed to play. But he wouldn't have let anybody bother me. My world was safe and very small. The only glimpse I had of a different world was on television. On Saturdays in 1950, we watched movies about the Korean War. Perhaps some of you remember them. They showed soldiers heroically fighting the enemy, the North Koreans, and protecting the Korean orphans and then winning the battle. None of the soldiers were ever injured or died. Other television programs had even less to do with reality. They were about famous heroes. Many of them were fictitious, like Avalon Cassidy, the Lone Ranger, and my personal favorite, Superman. Saturday television was definitely rated G when I was young. Then, of course, we got older and went to school where we met children who weren't quite the same as us. We realized that some children came to school dirty, some children told lies, some children stole candy from the corner store, and some used bad words. Words that we were sure were bad only because of the way that they were said and that we never heard them at home. Yes, slowly we learned that not everyone was like us, that some children came from homes that were probably a little bit frightening. Adam and Eve were like us when we were children. They didn't know that paradise was good because they had no idea of what bad was. They had nothing to compare their world to, but they were inquisitive and self-centered. They were tempted to try the fruit if for no other reason than that they were told not to. God told Eve and Adam that if they ate the forbidden fruit that they would die. What kind of death was God referring to? Was it the immediate death of their physical bodies? Or was it that the kind of life that they lived would come to an end? That life in paradise would not be forever? We know that curiosity, if not just plain defiance of God, drove Adam and Eve to eat the forbidden fruit. And like most people who are going to do something that they know is wrong, Eve didn't want to do it alone, so she gave some of the fruit to Adam. Now, Adam, who had heard everything that the serpent had said, was well aware of God's warning. He didn't hesitate to taste the fruit. He was just as guilty as Eve, and just as self-centered as she was. Adam and Eve knew at once that they had done wrong, disobeying God's law about the tree. They knew at once what evil was and were ashamed, but it was too late. They had lost paradise forever. We also know that Adam and Eve didn't die at once because they defied God. But now they had to work the land and grow their food and build their own home and protect themselves from wild animals. They would grow old and possibly get sick, and then they would die. Adam and Eve had traded paradise for free will when they ate the forbidden fruit. Free will, the ability to make our own choices. That is something that we're all very familiar with. And so was Jesus. Now we read another story about temptation, but this one is about Jesus. When he was 30, Jesus knew that it was time for him to leave the life he knew as a carpenter and begin his ministry. He was leaving behind his family and the town of Nazareth, where everything was familiar. Nazareth, the town where he had grown up, the town where he knew everyone and everyone knew him. I'm sure that it was just like any other town or neighborhood that you grew up in, small and close-knit, where if you did something wrong, if your parents didn't see you, a neighbor did and called them and told them all about it. This was the world that Jesus was going to walk away from. He would be without a job, without a home, and without his family. He would walk to the Jordan River and be baptized by his cousin John the Baptist, because Jesus knew that the time had come for him to begin the work that God had planned for him. And when Jesus was baptized, he went up immediately from the water, and behold, the heavens were opened, and he saw the Spirit of God descending like a dove and alighting on him. And lo, a voice from heaven saying, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." What an awesome responsibility. The Spirit of God announces to John the Baptist and Jesus himself that this is my Son, and that God was well pleased with him. Jesus now had to fulfill his destiny, the mission that God had planned for him. The mission that Jesus had been aware of since he was 12 years old and reading the scriptures in the temple in Jerusalem. Jesus had always been human. He knew pain and suffering. He knew hunger and satisfaction. He had been sad and he had been happy. Now was the time for him to walk as one with God, to be God in human form, but with all the desires and foibles of being human. So after being baptized, Jesus is led by the Spirit into the wilderness and spends 40 days there fasting and praying about his new mission. After he finishes his days of contemplation, Jesus meets the devil, and here his temptations begin. The devil will attempt to lure Jesus into putting aside his sense of mission, to be influenced by his own personal needs or for his own safety. Jesus is hungry, and we've all been hungry. We know the empty feeling in the pit of our stomachs that aches for food. Jesus felt that too. And now he has all the powers of God. And the devil tempts him to use that power to satisfy his hunger by turning the rocks into loaves of bread. What courage Jesus showed, not to give in to the human pain of hunger and resist misusing his power so that he would have something to eat. Jesus rebukes the devil by quoting from the book of Deuteronomy that tells us that man will not live by bread alone, but by the words that come from God. Now, the devil isn't going to give up that easily, because if he can get Jesus to misuse his power, then he'll have control over God. And so the devil tries again with another tempting offer. The devil takes Jesus to Jerusalem and stands with him at the very top of the temple. He tells Jesus to throw himself off the pinnacle because Jesus can summon the angels to come down from heaven and save him from crashing into the courtyard below. Again, Jesus defies the devil by again quoting Deuteronomy, that you should not tempt the Lord your God. But the devil is persistent. He tries for a third time to get Jesus to misuse his powers. This time the devil takes Jesus to the mountaintop and shows him the world and all of its riches. Bow down and worship me, and all the riches of the world will be yours, says the devil. But Jesus rebukes the devil. Be gone, Satan. You shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. Because Jesus had a deep understanding of his mission, the devil could not persuade him to misuse his powers. But just think about it. What would really have been the misuse of God's power? The turning of rocks into loaves of bread? Or was there a deeper, more devious temptation? Was the devil tempting Jesus to use his power to eliminate hunger from the world? With his powers, Jesus would also be able to stop accidents from happening, and he could cure all of the diseases. But was this what God wanted Jesus to do? Jesus understood that he needed to teach God's love, and that the people who heard his message would share that love with others, and that they would feed his people and comfort them and care for them. Now, with the second temptation of jumping off the top of the temple, is the devil just trying to get Jesus to use his power to have the angels come out of heaven and save him? Or was the devil tempting Jesus to let his ego take over and prove to everyone who he was? With the temple at the center of Jewish life, if Jesus had jumped off the temple and been saved by the angels, then everyone in Jerusalem would have seen this. And everyone would have known that Jesus was the Messiah. No one would have questioned his relationship with God or his authority. Would God want Jesus to be the showman who attracted the people to God because of his sheer power? Or did God want Jesus to sit with the people and lead them into a personal relationship with God through prayer? In the third temptation, the devil takes Jesus to the mountaintop and offers him all the power over all the riches of the world. Is this what the devil was after? Or did the devil have something else in mind? What was the real temptation this time? Jesus had been raised in a country that was overrun by the soldiers of the Roman Empire. Foreign soldiers walked their streets and enforced the laws of Rome. With the power of God, Jesus could easily become the general of God's army, overpower the Romans, and restore autonomy to his homeland. If Jesus had become a great military leader, would the war have stopped there? Or would the people have wanted Jesus to conquer other countries? What would this Jesus, the general, freedom fighter, be teaching? Would it be the New Testament lesson of God is love? Or would it be a God of fear and war? Because Adam and Eve had absolutely no idea of their mission or their part in God's plan, they didn't stop to look at all of the gifts that God had given them. They defied God and paid the consequences. Adam and Eve satisfy their self-centered desires by listening to and believing what the devil has told them. Jesus puts aside his desires and needs, ignoring the devil, and moves on to fulfill God's mission for him. How do we react when we are tempted by the devil? Do we stop and think about God's mission for us? It is so easy to misuse the gifts that God has given us. It is so easy to quickly satisfy our own hunger by buying the car, the Coach bag, or the electronic gadget. People are selfish. We are selfish. We will buy what makes us happy right now and not think about tomorrow. But God gave us some very special gifts. God gave us life. God gave us our world. God made us human. God gave us the ability to make choices. We all need to take a deep breath and pray. We need to talk to God and discover his mission for each of us. We need to take the time to be peaceful and hear his answer.